The fungus that cursed a village. Bread, madness, and the Salem Witch Trials. Hello, my favorite crumb-chasing bakers. I'm Rachel Parker, your resident storyteller here at the Breaking Bread podcast from Crust Crumb Academy. Around here, loaves are never just loaves. They're clues to old secrets, kitchen magic, and the quiet myths rising right under our noses. So grab a slice, get cozy, and let's see what the bread wants to tell us today. But I need to warn you. Today's story is a little darker than usual. This one lives right at the intersection of bread, science, and one of the most haunting episodes in American history. And the terrifying part? It might have all started at the dinner table. Let's go to Salem, Massachusetts, 1692. It's winter turning to spring in a small, tight-knit Puritan village. The kind of place where everybody knows everybody, where religion runs everything, where the rules are strict, and the world outside the village feels very large and very threatening. And then, the girls start getting sick. It begins with two, Betty Paris, the 9-year-old daughter of the village reverend, and her cousin, Abigail Williams. They start having fits, violent, terrifying fits. Their bodies convulse. They scream. They complain of the sensation of something crawling underneath their skin, as if invisible hands are pinching and clawing them from inside. They have visions. They see things no one else can see. They cry out the names of people they say are tormenting them. The village doctor examines them and reaches a conclusion that would change everything. He cannot find a physical cause. And so, being a deeply religious man in a deeply religious community, he names the only other explanation he knows: bewitchment. What follows is one of the most notorious chapters in American history. Over the next several months, accusations of witchcraft spread like wildfire. More than 150 people are imprisoned. 14 women and 5 men are executed. The whole village fractures under suspicion, fear, and grief. And then, just as abruptly as it started, it stops. By the spring of 1693, the fits are gone. The accusations slow. The madness lifts like fog burning off a field, and life, shattered and changed, limps back to something like normal. For 300 years, historians wrestled with what really happened in Salem. Mass hysteria, they said. Religious extremism, social pressure, political scheming, power plays between village factions. All of that was true, to varying degrees. But in 1976, a scientist named Linda Caporael published a paper in the journal Science with a title that stopped a lot of people cold. She called it Ergotism, the Satan Loosed in Salem. And the bread community has never been quite the same since. So, what is ergot? Ergot is a fungus. Specifically, it's a fungus called Claviceps purpurea, and it grows on rye and other grain crops under very specific conditions. A cold winter followed by a wet, damp spring. When those conditions are right, the fungus invades the rye plant and replaces the healthy grain kernels with dark, purple-black growths called sclerotia. From the outside, they can look like slightly darkened or oddly shaped grains, easy to miss, easy to grind right along with the rest of the rye into flour. And in the 1600s, nobody in Salem, or almost anywhere else, knew what ergot was, what it did, or how to spot it. When you eat bread made from ergot-contaminated flour, you are essentially consuming a cocktail of toxic alkaloids, chemicals that are, as it turns out, chemically very similar to LSD. The symptoms of ergot poisoning, which doctors now call ergotism, include violent muscle convulsions, vomiting, hallucinations, delusions, temporary blindness, the terrifying sensation of something crawling under the skin, and in severe cases, a condition called St. Anthony's fire, where the blood supply to the extremities is cut off, causing burning pain and eventually gangrene. Take a moment and hold that list next to what those girls in Salem described. Convulsions, visions, crawling sensations under the skin, screaming, bodies twisting beyond their control. The match is striking. Caporael dug into the historical weather records for Salem and found that the winter of 1691 had been exactly the kind of cold, wet, damp season that ergot thrives in. The lowland areas around Salem, particularly the farms on the western side of the village, grew rye, and those lowland, marshy fields were precisely the conditions where the fungus would have flourished. She also noticed something else. The girls who first showed symptoms, and most of the early accusers, lived on that western side of the village. The families who lived on the drier eastern side, largely unaffected. And when the accusations did spread to the eastern families, they looked much more like the social contagion of fear and suggestion, groupthink, rather than physical illness. One more detail that sends a chill down the spine. The trials ended abruptly in the spring of 1693. Caporale's theory has a very simple explanation for that. By spring of 1693, Salem had simply run out of the contaminated grain. The old rye was gone. New grain, grown in different conditions, replaced it. The ergot disappeared from the food supply, and the devil, it seems, went with it. Now, and this is important, not every historian accepts the ergot theory. The Salem Witch Museum and several serious academics have pushed back, pointing out that ergot poisoning typically affects entire families eating the same bread, not just the young girls in select households. Some argue the geography doesn't hold up perfectly under scrutiny. Others point to very human explanations: political tensions, land disputes, the terrifying pressure of Puritan religious life, as more than enough to explain what happened. The truth is probably layered. A contaminated rye harvest may have lit the match. But the kindling, the fear, the theology, the social fractures, the very human hunger to find someone to blame was already there, stacked and waiting. What I find most haunting about this story as a baker isn't the witchcraft part. It's the bread part. A loaf of rye bread sat on a family table. It looked normal. It smelled normal. A mother sliced it, handed it to her children, watched them eat. She had no idea. No way to know. And the thing that was supposed to nourish them, the most basic, most trusted food in their world, was the thing that unraveled everything. That is the quiet horror at the center of the ergot story. Bread has always carried enormous symbolic weight: blessing, life, community, abundance. We've talked in other episodes about how sacred it was, how people kissed a dropped piece off the floor, how they traced a cross before cutting to honor what it cost to bring that loaf to the table. But here, in Salem, the bread itself became the curse. And nobody knew it until the grain ran out. Ergot didn't disappear from history after Salem, by the way. There were outbreaks across medieval Europe for centuries, whole villages stumbling, convulsing, seeing visions. They called it St. Anthony's fire, and they prayed to the saint for deliverance. As recently as 1951, a small town in France called Pont-Saint-Esprit suffered an outbreak of mass hallucinations and madness that some researchers have since linked to contaminated grain. Today, ergot is well understood. Modern grain inspection, fungicide treatments, and careful milling have made ergotism in developed countries extremely rare. When you grind your flour or bake your sourdough rye, you're protected by centuries of hard-won knowledge that came, in part, from villages that didn't have it. So the next time you bake with rye, that deep, earthy, complex grain that so many of us love, take a moment to appreciate not just its flavor, but its history. Rye fed empires. Rye started revolutions. Rye is at the heart of some of the most beloved sourdoughs in the world. And in Salem, Massachusetts, in the winter of 1692, rye may have done something else entirely. Before we go, I want to hear from you. This is one of those stories where the more you look at it, the more questions it raises. Do you think the ergot theory holds up? Have you ever baked with rye and felt that there's something wild and ancient in it? Something the other grains don't quite have? Come tell us inside Crust Crumb Academy or in our Baking Great Bread at Home community. And if this episode gave you a little shiver the next time you reach for your rye flour, well, you're welcome. I'm Rachel Parker, and this has been the Breaking Bread podcast, where even the most ordinary loaf on your table might be hiding an extraordinary and occasionally terrifying story. Until next time, bake with curiosity, handle your rye with respect, and never stop asking what's really in your bread.